This is Theology Bits, a ministry of Central Lutheran Church, Eugene, Oregon. I'm Pastor Ben. This week, I'm introducing our new educational series on Tuesday evenings called A New Church, A New World. This is session 1. And you'll see from the title that what we're going to be looking at is, what is this world we're living in? What kind of church do we need to be to address this world? Well, it begins by asking, what's different? What's going on? And you might have noticed many of these trends. What, for example, have you noticed in your church community as where energy is being created? Where is there movement and excitement? Is it where it used to be? What have you noticed about church attendance lately? What have you noticed about who is coming? How often they come? In what way are they coming? Do they tend to come in person? Do they tend to stay home and join us from home? Is there a new way of being religious? We might wonder. Have you noticed a difference in who is interested in volunteering? Where are they interested in volunteering? Are you finding some things are getting a lot of activity and others really are none? Do we find that, for example, committees are getting harder and harder to fill? Or are we finding that that's really not a problem at all? The reason I ask these questions is because I think many people have opinions about it, but may not have actually carefully looked into it. And largely here, Central Lutheran is in Eugene, Oregon, and so in the Pacific Northwest, what is the larger culture? Sometimes the Pacific Northwest can be called the none zone, meaning that when on a survey asking what religious affiliation do you hold to, they no longer are entering the question of agnostic, but none, meaning we have no relationship with religiosity at all. Have we noticed a kind of illiteracy of what the scriptures say, what just Christianity is, and what does that look like? How is it reflected? What you might have noticed is a concept of indifference. This is very different than those with radical challenges to religion or frustrations with religion, but simply, are they even interested in the question? This is some of the questions that we fundamentally have. And what we're faced with is asking these questions is not just what the culture around us is, but also, is there a difference between the trends in the culture around us and the trends within the church itself? And all of it is leading us to ask the fundamental question, who are we? Who are we as the church, a progressive Lutheran church in Eugene, Oregon in 2023? That's really going to be the fundamental question behind this new series, A New Church, A New World, is to consider, who are we in this time and place? Well, we're going to begin this series in a particular way based on a book called The Prepare Leader by Erica James and Lynn Perry Wooten. This book is actually a book that is about businesses and how businesses respond to crisis. And the reason we're starting here is because they present an interesting idea of how crisis gives us a unique opportunity to ask the question of, who are we? And so, when James and Wooten describe crisis and describe businesses, and that's really what it is, it's a book about business, has nothing to do with religion, but just says, what are the steps that a crisis provides? Well, the first one is early warning signs. Signal detection. And any organization may or may not pay attention to these early warning signs. The second step or phase in a crisis is, if you paid attention to those warning signs, then preparation and hopefully prevention of a crisis. Third phase is damage containment. Can we keep this crisis from being as catastrophic as it could be? What can we do in the midst of it? Fourth phase, once the crisis is over, how do we recover? And then the fifth phase, which is why I'm bringing this whole thing up, is on learning and reflection. Now, this book is written about just crises and how communities can respond to crises. And it points out that these first four are not optional. These are what a crisis drives forward. As one sees, whether or not one actually notices the early warning signs, those come from the crisis. Then preparing is what anyone would do if they see a crisis coming. Damage containment, again, is what you have to do in the midst of a crisis. And then once it's over, you have to try to recover one way or another. Now, what Wooten and James present, though, is this fifth phase is where there is opportunity. The way a crisis gives you the opportunity to reflect and learn about it, and it's not something that a crisis requires. That is, most organizations even don't do this, and it's to their detriment. Now, this book was written in 2021 and is largely dealing with the crisis of COVID-19. But really, the model of it fits with any crisis, seeing crisis as opportunity, seeing that there is always space to reflect. And of course, what is this reflecting? It's reflecting this question of, who are we? Because in a crisis, we can, if we take the time, see the way that the crisis unveils who we are, even with things that have absolutely nothing to do with that crisis. It just because of the character of what happened, something has been revealed or unveiled about our community and what its character is, that is either something to lean into or something to address and try to change. And so this week in this series, we're going to be spending some time in reflection and asking, what is the opportunity we've had with this new crisis or whatever crisis, and if it hasn't been too long, even, yes, indeed, the pandemic, to say, what have we learned about the character of who we are? And so we can look at who is the church as it is before it's a new church. We have to know where we are in our own space. So, for example, is there a fundamental difference between our church and the larger community? Well, these are things we'll be exploring in more depth on Tuesday night. Please join us. This has been Theology Bits. I'm Pastor Ben.